Hello, my name is Teresa Alcantar, and this is my final project for English 3010, and it is the podcast episode. Now, this is just going to be a monologue solo commentary, and I really wanted to focus on my personal experiences in different classrooms throughout my years and the experiences I've had in college and what I've taken away from this specific class in general, because I thought that doing so would be very insightful to what I've taken away from this class and what's really impactful for me and my journey to want to become an English teacher for high school students. Now, uh, I've usually been pretty good at school. I was always getting pretty good grades and stuff, but my mom has always told me that, like, when I was younger in like second and third grade, I had real trouble reading. Like, I was having such difficulties that I would pick up a book and pretend to read it and make up the story in my head just from like the illustrations. And I have vivid memories of doing this, like while we were given time to just read by ourselves. I was like, yeah, he's in a bus, he's doing this, and it might have been a completely different story. But the teacher I had at that time noticed, and I always remember her name. Her name was Mrs. Gaffrey, and I had her for second and third grade. But she noticed this, and she was able to tell my mom that I was having trouble and I needed help reading, and that allowed my mom to go take me to special classes after school at like a tutoring center to read better, and also in the school itself. And after that, like, I just started to really like not like it, but be able to actually read properly and everything like that. And I know that Mrs. Gaffrey and what she had done to help me in my educational journey really had an impact on me, because my mom told me that after I had left Mrs. Gaffrey's classes, I had told everyone, like, when they ask you what you want to be when you grow up, I was always saying, I want to be a teacher. And like, it's funny to think about that, because I went off to thinking like maybe I'll do other stuff like being a vet or other scientific things, and I was like, but when it came down to it, to come back to pick a major for college, I reverted back to teacher, because I'm like, hey, this was something I had said back in the day, but now that I'm a little bit older and I understand things a little bit more and more aware of what's happening in the school settings, it's something I really want to do. And not just because, like, most people are like, oh, you just want summers off, you just want to have all these holidays. For me, once I got into high school, I was seeing all these different students and how all of them reacted different to different teachers. How when we had a great teacher, classes were great and amazing, and we were all able to learn at our own pace. And when we had a bad teacher or not as equipped teacher, it was very difficult, and some students would be disrespectful, some would not care. And even when we had a good teacher and the topics were difficult, they always asked each other for help, and more often than not, I was the one being asked to help them. And it was something that, like, most people would be like a super annoyed and like, no, I can't help you right now, I don't want to. I was always the kind of person that was like, sure, I'll help you, just I gotta make sure I get my stuff done too. And honestly, I was not bothered by that. I really liked being able to help them and see that what I was able to do had an impact, because they're like, yes, I was able to get this paper better, or now I understand what this book said, or um, this equation seems so difficult, now it kind of makes sense to me. And I was like, I can really help someone, like the teachers that I've had that were amazing help me. And I've had many of these different teachers throughout my years, like Mrs. Gaffrey, Mrs. Fleischman, Mr. Yoakum, and they were great. They really engaged students and really tailored the classroom to their needs and desires. And I was so grateful for that, because without Mrs. Gaffrey, I wouldn't know really how to read as well as I am. And without Mrs. Fleischman, I wouldn't have found this love of reading that I grew up to have, and like have all these different book series that I love and cherish and collect, and make sure that when I find this book that I really love, I buy it, even if I don't have already read it. I buy it for my own collection. And then Mr. Yoakum just like guiding me, saying like, hey, you are smart enough and you have enough potential that you don't need to go straight to the PC, portable college, junior college, and get stuck there like a lot of our students do. You can go straight to a 4-year university. You could go to an Ivy League. You could reach for the sky. And I was a little bit scared, but I was very grateful for him and his help, because he really kind of took me under his wing and guided me like, hey, you could do this and you could do this. I'm always here for help. And having a teacher like that was really beneficial to me, and to all of us that were in his class, because he was not like the other English teachers we had at that time. Because the other ones, I always remember this one instance where he wasn't the greatest English teacher, and people always made fun of him, and it was just people really didn't like his classroom, and one day they started a bonfire in his classroom by throwing a piece of paper and lighting it on fire. And I was so mortified because I'm like, that would never happen in my classroom. My classroom with Mr. Yoakum was so positive and we were all having fun and we were all actually learning that something like that would have never taken place. And then that brings you back to the mindset of what is the difference between this teacher and Mr. Yoakum that causes this difference in student engagement and respect to their educator and everything like that. And every time I thought back to it, I'm like, what went wrong in this situation? I think back to how everything was run and how everything was kind of handled, and like Mr. Yoakum really took charge of the classrooms, but also made them fun. The other teacher, he was very not laid back, but stern and kind of, I would say, lazy, but I wouldn't want to say it because that's a little bit mean, but in a sense he kind of was, and that reflected itself on the students' actions and stuff in his classroom. And I believe that really it takes a student to look at that situation and realize this isn't how a classroom should be run or should be done. I can be someone that is able to step into a classroom in the future and make it as if and make it to the way that I had it when I was in high school or middle school or whatever, with these great teachers who were able to help me in ways I didn't know that they could as teachers. Because a teacher doesn't just teach you science, math, history. They teach you about life and how to better believe in yourself. And I really, really love that aspect of teaching because you are able to have an impact on a student's life, and you could see that impact later on. And sometimes they even come back and they thank you for it. Even if they don't, you can see them. Maybe you see their name in the paper or you see their name in the news. You're like, they are doing things. They are very great. And I've just, when I started to near the end of high school, I was like, I really want to be this kind of person because I was always wanting to help people in my classroom with their classwork because I don't want to see them struggle. If they really wanted to do good and were trying to get help, I was like, I'll help you. I'm not going to be the kind of person that sits back and watch you fail when you're searching for the help. Now, on the other hand, there were those classmates I had that were like, hey, give me the answers. Why don't you just do it for me? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it for you because then you don't learn anything. And I think that a lot of these students had not had that someone to push them and be like, you can do this by yourself if you just try. And that is, I believe, what really makes a teacher important, because when they give that positive enforcement, like, yes, you can do this, you don't need to cheat, you can do this, you just have to think about it a little bit and you'll find the answers. You just have to think about it. And I really liked this aspect. Now, when I got into college to move into like what I saw and what really solidified my want, because like your first year, maybe two, you're still figuring out, is this something you really want to do? And I had already committed to the English, an English major with a credential emphasis to take down that path. And I was still kind of apprehensive, like, maybe I don't know if I really want this, I'll just try it out. But throughout the classes and having all these amazing professors, I was like, this is something I really want to do. Because the way they taught, they were so passionate about what they taught. It really instilled in me this great passion, because I love the literature I was reading. I love being able to write the papers I was writing. And I love the conversations we were having in class, because it's a whole new environment. It's more with people that are on your own wavelength and that you can really talk to. And it was even better to have these specialized classes that are meant for the credential emphasis, where you can get your credentials in the 4-year span or whatever. And I was like, hearing their stories, especially from Professor Larimer and like my other teaching professors, they just had this passion that you could feel when they talked about like how classrooms are run, what they liked about it, and what they thought was challenging, but still strove to get through it. And something like that really inspires you to be like, hey, I can do this too. I want to be able to be like them. And professors like that show it in a very, very, very real way. They're like, yes, there are challenges. It's not hunky-dory all the time. You have issues with grading. You have issues with attitude. You have challenges with trying to make sure everyone gets out of the class what they need. And that's something that you have to take into account. And although it might scare a lot of students off and be like, I don't want to go with that, that's too much pressure on me, I'm like, I can do this. I can manage it to where I have enough time to make sure that I'm okay, make sure my students are okay, and make sure they're learning what they need to learn from me, because that's what I'm there for. I'm there to teach them. And really, the college experience is such a great one for me. And ever since I got here to CSU Bakersfield, I was like, this is where I need to be, this is where I need to get my degree, and this is the kind of environment I can really strive in and become a better person. Because something like this I never had before. I never had such freedom, such ability to study what I wanted. And that's what I really liked about coming to the school, having my freedom, and being the English major that I chose to be, because I love reading. I honestly love writing papers too, because I choose a topic that really interests me. And that's something I always strive to do, because if I'm not interested in the topic, I won't write about it, or at least won't write about it in a meaningful way. I'll just make something up or try and fit as many little things as I can in it to really benefit myself and maybe boost my grade. But in these classes I have taken, I've read so many different stories and full-on novels, short stories, plays, myths, and it's just been an amazing experience. Now, when I think back to this specific class in general, English 3010, I was very grateful that I decided to take it this semester, because as of right now, I am a sophomore, about to be a junior, and I know that throughout the class, Professor Lermar referred it to his students being juniors in college. I'm a sophomore, I'm still very young, but the information he was giving me is something that is so beneficial that I can soak up and hold on to. I've even have my notes and just I'm gonna hold on to them for whenever I need them, because I know I'm definitely gonna need them in the future, because they're just a great resource to turn back to. Because I love just hearing the different outlooks and different theories and tools to use when you're teaching, like the Feynman technique. I'm looking at it right here, and like really focusing on how do you teach this to certain groups, and what challenges do you have, and how can you look back at that and make it better, and doing that to the specific group you're teaching it to. Who are you wanting to teach this lesson to, and what can you make it benefit them, and just allowing them to really flourish in like the zone of proximal development. This was actually something I learned the previous semester before this class, because I took psychology and we mentioned it, and now I can apply this psychological term to teaching, and that was so amazing to be like, hey, I've already learned about this. What can a child do by themselves, what they can do with the help of an adult, what they can do, what they cannot do at all. And like you really think about that, and when you're a teacher, you have to think about that, because you're like, what do my students need my help with? What are things they can do on their own and they're fine? And what do I need to teach them still? What is something that they are so clueless about that they don't know what it is? And something like that, I'm like, I want to be able to see the light up, like the eureka moment in that student's life when they learn this thing, because I've had it many times in classroom where I'm like, I was having difficulty with this text, but I have a vague idea, but then like the professor helps you, or a student brings up a conversation, you're like, wait, yes, that means this, and that makes total sense now. And that kind of release is just so euphoric, because you're like, I know it now, I understand it, I love it. I also liked how this class really focused on like engaging students, like how I said that I don't write papers I don't want to, but if I write a paper, I want it to be something I can enjoy and really have fun in. And like engaging the students through the student agency thing, and like making sure it's something that interests them, giving them enough choice to where they can choose what interests them. Because a lot of the times I've had papers where it's just like, here's your one topic, go, you have to do it this way. And no one likes to write papers that way. Like a kind of a broad yet specified topic, like, we're going to talk about these things, but you can explore it in this many different ways. And I love that, because I'm like, my brain and everyone else's brain thinks differently. We have to have that choice, because without that choice, there is no creative outlet to really write what we want to write. We're just regurgitating everything that a professor said or our classmates said. And there's no real learning. It's just word vomit on the page without really retaining it in your brain. Now, I really liked how in this class we also did, like, even though we did have to switch to online with the podcast because of coronavirus and everything, I still thought that that switch was very, very, like, important to know and understand, because not everything goes according to plan. Sometimes you have to change and adapt, and this was a big way every single school in the country had to adapt, both elementary, middle, high, and college. We all had to change to this electronic delivery, because we are not able to physically be in each other's room. But Professor Lermer, I do have to give it to you. You are one of the professors that I believe really strived in this new way, because Some of my professors were very confused, others were totally fine, but the way you engaged us as students and you helped us really get as much out of this class as we could with the limited time or limited access we had was amazing. And I loved the podcast. It was a great idea because we could watch them over and over again. We could take notes on them. We could take notes on the little citations and callbacks you did. And hearing from all these different educators and people associated with education was amazing because every teacher has a different experience and you can learn a little bit from every single person. Like with Dr. Joshua Kunith and his ideas and perception on grading and how like you need a grade for the benefit of the student. Don't grade crap that doesn't matter. Don't give them busy work. Give them something that's meaningful that will help them and that it's also easy on you because you don't want to be bogged down by having to read so many different assignments and grade so many different papers. You need to focus in on the one thing and help your students with that because what is the benefit of a class if when your students are given back a grade they learn nothing from that grade? It's just a letter on their page because they need to understand what was done wrong and what they can do to benefit them and improve because you need to improve. You can't just stay stagnant because then there's no learning. There's just a stagnant cause and then most students won't achieve anymore. They won't believe they can achieve anymore. And I really liked how Dr. Kunith was like, my students I help with like only a 1 point grading system and things like that and having assignments that are just to get their ideas out and tell me what they need to learn still without grading them because again if you have so many assignments you get bogged down and the students get bogged down. I've had a professor this semester that assigned way too many readings and way too many writings that she got stressed and we were all stressed because we're trying to do all these things in the middle of all this and that wasn't good for either of us. We both had issues. So it makes sense to think of teaching as a way to benefit the students and yourself because you're going through this with them. You're having to adapt and change and grade and everything like that. So you need to make it so that you know what you're doing and they know what they're doing and everything's harmonious. Now, I just really liked this class and I really thought that it was beneficial. I know that to some of the older students who might have had more experience and stuff, they saw this as like maybe a class that didn't have to be as lengthy or in depth. But for me, as just a sophomore, I'm like, this is what I need to know at the moment. This is what I should know as someone that's going to go into teaching. I need to know these grading tools and teaching techniques and learning theories because again, I'm new, I'm young, I need to understand this so I can be the best teacher I want to be. Because again, you can have a great teacher, but they can still not really teach their students anything. What's the point of a great teacher if their students learn nothing? You had to first think of what do your students need to learn and how can you help them learn that in the best and most productive way. And that's something I wanted to know and this class was able to help in so many different ways with like grading techniques and stuff like that. And I just liked it so much and I honestly liked Professor Larimer and your the way you taught. Like some people might have found it annoying because like I know some people have different perspectives on other people, but I thought it was very interesting because you seemed so full of life and so energetic that everything seemed like you knew what was important and you were only going to tell us what was important because you knew that that's what we needed and you really wanted to help us in any way forward. And that's why I also like the way you transitioned to the online learning because everything was like super beneficial to us. It might have caused more work on your end with the podcast and everything, but you're like, my students need this to really understand these topics and get the full benefit from this class. And that's what I believe teachers should do is think of their students first. What do their students need first and foremost? And how can I best accommodate for that? And I just love that because I believe that teachers need to be caring individuals that put the needs of others before themselves. Because I always hear these horror stories of teachers going crazy and like being so rude to their students when their students should be their number one priority. They should be teaching them and not focusing so much on the lesson being taught, but the students understanding that lesson. And it's just crazy. Now I've talked for quite a while now because I like to talk a lot when I'm talking about myself and things I've seen and witnessed and heard. But as Professor Lermer ended his podcast, was like, what book are you reading currently? What do you like? I want to kind of end this the same way with like the books I've read this semester from my different classes that I really, really enjoyed. Because I took like an American literature class, a British literature class, a ethnic minority literature class, and I really liked all the different kinds of readings. I know that some people chose not to do every single bit of reading we had, but I honestly enjoyed them. Like, for my American literature class, we read The Road by Cormac McCarthy, and I enjoyed that book so much because I had read it back in high school for fun, and it was such a moving story, and it made me cry when I had read it in high school. And I was so pleased to get to read it again and actually buy it this time for my at-home library. And I was already like, I get to get back into and learn and read more about this father and son. It was something that's so moving. And then to get back into like the ethnic minority class, that one was very powerful because we were given all these different stories about all these different ethnicities, like Indian, Asian, African American, and their stories were so moving because it really talked about the hardships they went through and the things they had to witness and suffer through during trying times. Like in The Emperor Was Divine, it talks about the Japanese internment during World War II and the struggles that a certain family went through during this time. And in Sing and Broken Sing, there is this family that had so many issues with like drugs and family discipline and jail and the death of loved ones. It's just so moving, and I just love these stories so much. I guess that's why I became an English major, because I love these works of literature and I really want to help others see what I see in them. And I really tried to with my friends that didn't read them, because I'm like, this is really a good story though. You get all these different aspects out of it. And I feel like that really you should be inspiring to your students in the same way, inspiring them to look further into different stories and texts and stuff like that to help improve their knowledge and their understanding of the world around them, because we all need to understand a little bit more about the world around us, or else we are so blinded by our own needs and thoughts and viewpoints that we are unable to empathize with one another. And I think that's very important. To end this short little podcast off about my own kind of educational experiences and viewpoints, and especially about this class and everything, just want to end it with, this wasn't the second half of my sophomore year I envisioned during January, but I'm glad that it was able to pan out as well as it did, and I have to thank every single professor I had this semester, and I'm hoping that even with the changes that have come because of this pandemic, we can still continue to learn, and hopefully a new generation of very skilled and thoughtful teachers will come out of this. Thank you. Good night.